Welcome. Thank you for joining us on the Mirror Podcast. In each of our episodes, we'll be talking with one of our current or former fellows to learn a little bit more about their work, their early inspiration, some recent wins in their project, and maybe hear just a little about where they're headed next. Today, we're joined by Dr. Nita Evans and her project, Kommit Sports. Welcome, Nita, to this first inaugural attempt at a podcast for the Mirror Fellowship.
Thanks for having me.
Um, Absolutely. Our first guest is Nita Evans, whose project is Kommit Sports, which I actually haven't spoken to you for a while. So I'm excited to hear how that's been going.
Yes.
But first, in classic Mira spirit, did you happen to bring an object from somewhere in your surroundings that means something to you?
Yes, show and tell. So, in my surroundings, I actually have this photo. Can you see there?
Oh, yeah, great.
That
Yeah,
means a lot
yeah,
to me.
I
It's
recognize those faces.
do you recognize any of these people?
Oh, yeah.
These are my fellow cohort members from the class of 2021 for the Mirror Fellowship. And I actually keep this on my desk where I work when I'm dreaming, when I'm building, when I'm forecasting. But I look at this all the time, and it's just a reminder of the fact that I had the opportunity and continue to have opportunity to dream with other innovators and big thinkers, and that all of us are constantly working towards, pushing our idea forward into the world. And so, when I look at that and I see our smiles, but I also look at it and see the effort and the challenges and the moments of doubt, but that we have continued to forge forward. So that photo means a lot to me.
Wonderful. What, are you in touch with many of them?
Yes, I am. We absolutely
Great.
stay in touch. We check in with each other. Matter of fact, one of the challenges I put towards myself for this next quarter, of the quarter of this year, is to actually check in with everyone in the fellowship and just kind of go through the list and just do like 5-10 minute check-ins with folks. We have such a expansive community. Not there's not necessarily that there's a whole lot of us, but the relationships are deep. And so again, sometimes we're kind of in our own spaces doing what we're doing, and so being able to connect and keep that community relationship going is vital.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's so cool. No, I always like to hear that people are staying in touch and that it means something outside of our Zoom calls.
Yes, absolutely. We are
um,
the Stoke chasers, and we're still chasing Stoke.
nice. Nice. Well, let's give me a quick sort of where your business or where your idea, your project is at this moment, so people have a context, and then maybe we'll go back and hear a little more about who you are and where things came from.
Yes, yes. So Commit Sports. We're definitely in a place. I think we're still trying to tweak the exact model that I think that's going to be clear, that has the perfect fit for us. Even playing around with like, our exact mission vision, right? Because,
Hmm.
you're in the weeds, right? You're doing the work and then being able to tell the story, which, you continue to drive us forward in making sure that, we can tell the story.
Gotta have a
But
good
it's
story.
you gotta have a story, but it's really understanding about keeping it simple, right? So, if someone were to ask me like, what is your mission right now? I can tell them to be the go-to resource for preparing football families for the path to and through college, right? Through
Hmm.
knowledge sharing, and one of the main ways we're doing that is through mentoring. So being able to say it real quick, real easy in a way that people can understand it. We are, I guess, we would be entering into year two in this work of working with athlete families. And I use families because so much of this work focuses on like, how can we prepare students, right, for the transition from high school to college. But in this case, the journey of a student athlete is so different. They're not going into college, just for academics, but they're going really for athletics. And so making sure that we're working with parents and players simultaneously to prepare them for that transition successfully, so that these young men are able to, move forward in their athletic and academic careers at a good pace.
Nice, nice. Well, yes, I'm excited to hear. I'm excited to hear more about that. Um, but let's talk a little bit about where you came from. I mean, just so that we can get to know you, the world can get to know you a little
The
bit
world
better.
can get to know me.
Um,
Yes.
is there a memory from your childhood that you can think of that sort of informed how you got to what you're doing now, to what's important?
So I'm originally from New York. So at
Mhm.
moments during this podcast, if I start talking fast, that's when it comes out. And so originally from Long Island, New York. Uh, the real vivid memory I have is from childhood. I honestly feel that I was born with an equity lens. I feel like the
Hmm.
ability to actually see inequities in the world is something that I've always had. And so one of my earliest memories,
Interesting.
probably I would say I was probably about 7 or 8. I'd have these long drives to school and home from school with my mom. And so on those drives, we would drive through different neighborhoods and different communities. And so I was very aware of the fact that we go through certain communities and, there were people sitting on the corner, right? And folks who were laying on the street and, the homes looked sort of run down and, the yards and just, people hanging out. And then we go to other communities and on that drive and you're seeing these big, beautiful houses and, the kids were out and they seemed happy and, there just seemed to be all these things and access to resources that those folks had. And so, I would ask my mom, I'm like, well, what is it about these group of people that, life seems great for them and these folks over here seem to be struggling? And she didn't really have an answer for me, right? It was sort of like,
Hmm.
well, Nita, that's just kind of how it is. That's just the way the world is. But that answer wasn't good enough for me. And
Hmm.
I really believe from then I just had this innate sense and desire to figure out, right, how to create a more equitable world for all,
Hmm.
whether that was based on gender, race, socioeconomic status, ability, religion. It really didn't matter, right? It wasn't a particular thing. It was just the fact that I was really clear that some folks had access and advantages that other people didn't. And I just didn't think that was fair. I didn't think it was right, especially when people are sort of born into certain situations. And so, my mom's thing was when you'd ask her about me from my childhood, she's like, Nita wants to save the world. Like that's her calling, that's her thing. Right. So fast forward, here I am, trying to save every athlete, right? I don't really say it's saving, but it's not about saving, but it's really about helping people reach their full potential, right? And creating a more
Right.
level playing field, so that understanding that everyone has the right to live at a certain level and to have a certain level of standard of living and access to resources.
Can you tell me a little bit about sort of what that path looked like? So you made this observation when you were a kid,
Mhm.
and you were wanted to save the world, but then how did you find your way? Just brief steps, but just like how did you
Mhm.
find your way?
Yeah, I think in that, especially growing up in New York, because New York, the culture is very different there. I think so. So, and let me just also position this sort of dichotomy of my life of that I lived in a lower working class community, but I went to
Hmm.
school in an upper class wealthy community. My mother was a
Oh,
teacher
okay.
as an educator, so I had access to go to school where she was teaching.
I didn't know that. That's okay. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what it did for me is sort of it was able to sort of posit and juxtapose these two dichotomies of life of sort of where I was living, where I grew up versus where I went to school. And so I think that piece of understanding, and then like I said, sort of that 40-minute drive every day. And
Hmm.
so from there, growing up, I knew that I wanted to um, be a change maker, right? I mean, my favorite quote is "Be the change you wish to see in the world" by Gandhi.
Right.
And I said, well, how can I embody that? And so a lot of my early, from high school going into college, I don't think I was clear on exactly what that would be, but I constantly found myself taking jobs that were in areas of service, that were an area of trying
Hmm.
to help improve the lives and conditions of the people that I was working with. I do think it's important to note that I was a teen parent. And so that experience sort of layered, right,
Hmm. Right.
how I saw the world. the reality is 80% of teen moms never graduate high school. And so having my daughter in high school, right, that was my first uh, facing the reality of sort of like, am I going to now fall statistically into this group? And what does that look
Mm.
like? And so, how do I try to break this cycle? And so, fortunately, being able to graduate high school, did go on to college, junior college, got my community college, got my 2 year degree, then went on, got my bachelor's degree, and then earned a scholarship to go to grad school to get my PhD. And at that time, my career trajectory is I was going to, look at going into law school. And I had an
Mm-hmm.
advisor who said, "Hey, did you ever think about getting your PhD?" And I was like, "PH what? Like, don't you know?
Right.
Like, you know, I'm black. I'm in I'm grew up in a lower class community, single parent household. I'm a single mom. Like, no one that I knew did that." And so she's like, just apply. You'll never know what happens. And I applied and ended up getting a full 5 year scholarship to get my PhD at, Stony Brook University. And so at that point, it was like, okay, now, okay, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm going to get my PhD. But in sociology, right, it's about understanding and recognizing patterns, right? How does society
Right.
work? How does society function? How does it operate? And I think inherent in sociology is understanding inequality, inequality and
Right.
inequity in the world. So it just seemed like a natural draw for me, in that particular direction to say, hey, I'm going to pursue this educationally and then see where my career path takes me.
Okay. I like. Yeah. So it kind of continues throughout the whole. That observation really did keep going.
Exactly. Mhm.
What what happened? So you have your PhD. You're what happened to take you to football players,
Yes. Oh,
and
great
how
question.
does that?
Yes, how does that all fit? So
Yeah.
prior to that, so I had my daughter was the first, right? I had her first. So the earlier part of my career and that early years, going into grad school, I really was focused on sort of like how do I create those opportunities for teen mothers, right? To be
Hmm.
able to pursue an education. So like they're not sort of on this long term trajectory, right, of potentially living in poverty, right? How do we sort of uh, help move them out of that? And so during the time I was working on my doctorate, a lot of my work was in that particular area. I was heavily steeped in working with teen moms, and preparing them, for that to just graduate high school. Let's start there, and then to be able to create those opportunities to be able to go to college. As my career move forward. And after I actually finished getting my PhD, I had my second daughter, and then I had my son, who's the youngest. And so then, I really got into doing consulting work. And again, my consulting work was all focused on equity and access, working with school districts and preparing students from, under resourced communities to be able to understand that college is theirs, right? And help them
Hmm.
navigate that pathway. Well, what I found in that work, there were a lot of those students who didn't think college was theirs, who didn't have sort of a vision for life beyond high school, were young Black men, and that so many of those young Black men, starting from elementary school, middle school, when you'd ask them sort of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? 90% of their answers were something pertaining to sports. Like they all wanted to be LeBron James, right? They
Right.
wanted to be, Kobe Bryant. They wanted to be, you know, the next, Deion Sanders. And so it, as a researcher, right? Because now I'm putting on my academic hat, right? As a trained researcher, I began to ask questions about like, what is this about? And how do kids at 5, 6, 7, 8 already, so many, you see the pattern, so many of them believe that a cape,
Hmm.
is sort of that's a jersey is the only cape that a Black boy can wear, right? And that was fascinating to me. And it became sort of a research question that I had. Well, little did I know that my son was going to then be drawn to athletics like so many other young Black men in
Hmm.
America. And so, my son started on that pathway. And I started to say, okay, what's going on here? I'm like, well, we're going to infuse make sure we're prioritizing education. We're talking to him about college. We're talking to him about career, all of these things. But even with that, right, he just was like, Mom, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Evans. And, right, from the time my son was in elementary school, you asked him what he was going to do. He said, I'm going to be a professional football player. And
Huh.
so he knew from
How did
then.
that feel?
How did
I'm
that
just curious,
feel?
how did that feel to you? I mean, it seems like you had so much, so much already beforehand, where you're noticing noticing the inequities and noticing the path
Right.
trajectories, and then to have that your son suddenly wants to be a football player. I mean,
Yeah.
that must
I
have been
mean,
traumatic.
and honestly, I feel like I had to honestly just sit with it for a bit. I feel like I had to sit
Hmm.
with it. I feel like I had to unpack it. I feel like all parents, anybody listening to this, it's a parent. We all have sort of these visions and dreams for our kids. If we
Right,
talk to our parents, right, our own parents, they will tell us like, when you were little, I thought you were going to do this, or I thought you were going to do that. But I also think, and sort of the power of parenting is that our job is to be good stewards, right? To really
right,
help our
right,
kids grow and develop and tap into whatever their, interests are. And then our job is to then facilitate that. And so um, I was fine with his career goal that he said, hey, I want to
right,
be a professional athlete. My thing was like, how do we balance that, right? So that,
right,
you do understand that you need to be a good leader. You understand the value of service, that you really understand like you have to prioritize your education. So we
mhm,
just tried to sort of, if you will, front load his experience that way and create
right,
more balance for him. But in that journey, we began to see that his experience was very unique in that, and so many of the other young men that I got to know, the other families I would talk to, his other teammates, because he started playing, in fourth grade. They weren't necessarily having some of those same experiences, and it wasn't because parents didn't care, and I think that's important. It's important to say that, because people will say, well, why it's the parents' job. And while I do agree with that, you're also talking about a lot of kids who are first generation college goers. So if their parents
mhm,
didn't go to college, to be able to infuse that message in them and to be able to sort of direct them on that pathway is very difficult. And so that was a
right,
huge difference between my son's experience and a lot of the other young men that I was seeing early on. Right. So this was from the beginning of sort of the genesis of me recognizing there was this gap, not just in the research that's out there, but also in sort of facilitating programming to ensure that the young men who are on that trajectory, who do have athletic talent, because I found out my son really did have athletic talent. um, and so
yeah.
what does that look like?
How did it go? Where did it go for your son specifically?
Yeah, so again, he played sports, and we had a no pass, no play rule in the house
Hmm.
that started in middle school. So he was really clear about that. And again, I mean, he's 10, 11 years old, right? So, but he was passionate about this, and that was fine. And academically, he was a solid C student, right? He wasn't an A student. He wasn't a failing. He was just right there at a solid C at the time. And so once he got to high school, is when he said, so you guys know, like, I still want to be a professional athlete. And I'm like, okay. So then we started having conversations about, well, what does that mean? All right, okay, so in order to play professional sports, particularly in football, you have to go to college, right? Not only go to
Right.
college, but you have to be in college for at least 3 years. So in
Hmm.
in that space, unlike basketball, where we hear about the one and done, where they can go to college
Right.
for a year and then go pro, it doesn't work that way in football. And see, that's really one of the things that makes that working with football families so unique. Because if you're going to spend at least 3 years in college, at least three, many of them
Right.
spend four. Why not get a degree? Why why
Right.
why why don't we talk about how do you then make sure that in that, as you're pursuing the athletic dream, that you're also pursuing the academic dream? And
Hmm.
so I use the
Right.
whole, you know, our vision is this idea that, every athlete that enters college with a ball in one hand leaves with a degree in the other, right? And so
Wow.
for my son, it was, all right, let's talk about your grades. Let's talk about, can you get into college, right? Not only can you
Right.
get in, can you stay in? Okay, when you go to college, what are you going to major in, right? You're not majoring in football, okay? So what does that look like? How are you going to manage the academic and athletics? How do you manage all of the responsibilities and the pressures of practice and training and, your studying, your tutoring, all the after hours things that you have to do. And so we really started having those conversations with him then, right, in high school.
Right.
And he continue to hold up his end of the bargain, right? Academically in high school. And then it was around junior year that honestly we realized that maybe he's on to something, right? Like, because we suddenly started getting phone calls from universities that
Hmm.
colleges were coming through during practice. They were coming through to spring game. They were visiting, some of his high school games. His high school coach reached out and said, "There's some real interest in him, and we think that your son really could have an opportunity to be able to get his education fully paid for, and he gets to do what he loves, which is play football."
Wow. Wow. That must have felt really good.
It did. It was a relief after having had to pay for his older sisters to go to college. I mean, it really, honestly, it really is a gift. I mean, uh, to be able to have your college education, fully paid for. People say for free. Yes, while there's not the financial responsibility or burden for as it college is for so many
Hmm.
families that can't afford it. Of course, right? There's the responsibilities that they have, right? The expectation is that you're going to come play for this team, and you're not just coming to play just to show up. You're playing to win, right? Because college
Right.
football is a big business, right? It's $1 billion business that makes a lot of money off of its athletes. And
Right.
so, if what we know is that they're going to try to get everything they can out of these athletes. So the flip side of that is, how can athletes make sure that they get everything they can out of this college
Right.
experience, right? Out of the university, out of preparing themselves for, their next step, whatever that next step is going to be, whether it is as a professional athlete or not, but you're going to have to go pro in something, right? You're going to have to be a
Right.
professional in something. And so the work that we're doing is really about helping to shift that mindset, if you will, and really change the narrative, right? About what it means to be an athlete, and especially for young Black men who make up over 70% of, a lot of athletic programs, particularly in football and especially in the NFL.
Wow. So can you remember when the idea for commit sort of first came to you? Obviously, you were steeped in this world. You were coming from the inequities to then football thrown into your life, and sort of you're combining them and dealing with them on a personal level.
Yep.
But do you remember when it shifted? When you thought, wait, maybe this is something I can do in another way?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it was a perfect storm, right? And in coming into this work, because of,
Okay.
like I said, like, just my academic background, the lens through which I saw the world, my son playing football. Um, and I feel like I really was struggling to find a place of like where to put this work. Like I knew it was important, but
Hmm.
I didn't, there wasn't a space that was out there where I felt like, okay, this is the space where I feel like people are doing this work. Because when you look at sort of the college space, college athletic programs, like I said, they're focused on like, hey, we need you to get in here, we need you to work hard, we need you to win, we need you to stay academically eligible, right?
Right.
Outside of that space, where parents are concerned, they want to make sure their sons stay eligible, they want them to do well. So there was no sort of entity, right, that was doing this. And so frankly, I realized I was going to have to sort of create my own lane, if you will. And I was scared. I'm like, what does that look like? I need a place, almost like a birthing center, if you will, right? A place that I
Uh-huh.
can bring this to life and into the world. At the time, I didn't have the name Commit. I didn't have, all of the nuances of what it was going to be. And but I knew I needed something, and the something was the Mirror Fellowship. And I
Hmm.
just remembered, I was searching on, looking through Pro Fellows, and I, was just scrolling through, as I often would. And as an academic, again, I was always looking for, fellowships and those type of opportunities. And I came across the Mirror Fellowship, and I was like, oh, this is like, what's this? This is interesting. Little did I know how interesting it was going to be. Little did I know. And
I didn't realize that was such a turning point. Okay,
it
cool.
was
Keep going.
pivotal. Absolutely, it was pivotal because at the time I was still doing consulting work, but I also was very heavily steeped, in academia. At the time, I was a dean of academic affairs at an
Hmm.
institution, so I was doing a lot of administrative work, overseeing academic programs, working with faculty. And this particular institution is really a socially conscious institution focused on social change. So again,
Okay.
I'm still in that lane. Like everything I've done, right, is in that lane, but again, even there wasn't necessarily a space for this work that's so nuanced in what it is, and trying to figure out like
Hmm.
having community and being able to be with people who are going to sort of walk you through that. Like I said, I kind of just use like a place to a birthing center where you can go and be able to sort
Hmm.
of get the guidance and support that you need. And I came across the Mirror Fellowship at the time, and I was like, okay, let me apply to this. This seems interesting. I didn't know anything about it, and it's a good thing I didn't actually, to be honest with you, because I'm
What is?
yeah, I might
What
have
does that
been.
mean?
I might have, because I really didn't know going in how much it was going to require me to push on this idea, right? That
Okay.
the
Okay.
level of commitment that I was going to have and to do it and to understand that this was my work. And if I didn't do it,
Hmm.
no one was going to do it. And so applying for the Merit Fellowship was definitely the turning point. I felt like, I don't know, I guess I kind of, applying for the fellowship was really sort of like burning all the ships, if you will. Like I felt like,
Hmm.
at this point, like I had loved the consulting. I love my academic work. Um, but there was more, right? I knew there was more. I had recently lost both my parents, so even I was sort of this point in life, like, okay, wow, dealing with that. And so I just knew there was more. And so I just kind of was like, what, I'm gonna just burn the ships. Let me apply for this. And then getting the fellowship, that changed my life.
Cool. Wow, that's wonderful to hear that. Yeah. Um, can you tell me a little bit what it's like to wake up in the morning working on the stuff that you're working on?
Oh my gosh. It's it's hard to put into words the level of fulfillment that I have in my life now.
Hmm.
It brings me such a sense of significance and meaning, because I've always felt like I had a social responsibility to not just do good in the world, but like I said, leave it better than I found it. And I have this saying that I had shared with you all at our summit, and when I said it feels good to be lost in the right direction. And so, in doing this work, while it's still a work in progress, and there's so the vastness of like all of what this can be and what it will be, right? And where I know it will go. It doesn't mean I have everything worked out. It doesn't mean I have every answer, but I absolutely know I'm going in the right direction. And I actually was just having this conversation about 2 hours before we got on here, and I was saying I've never in my life felt so aligned in doing
Hmm.
what I literally feel like I know that I'm supposed to be doing in life. And that is a feeling that I just don't believe most people not only don't have it, but I don't even know if they ever get to it. And it's really just like a precious gift. But I didn't just arrive here, and it wasn't like someone just handed it to me. There was a lot of decisions I had to make, a lot of sacrificing, a lot of, like, again, pushing on the idea, a lot of failing forward. That's still yet to come, but it there's nothing that compares to the feeling I have that I wake up every day knowing that I'm doing something meaningful and I'm in purpose, and I get paid to do it. So it
That sounds pretty good.
sounds pretty
Um,
good.
can you just tell me a little bit more about what you like? What do your days look like
Oh,
now that you're working for Commit? Like, what does a day look like in Nita's life?
yeah. So the approach that I take is sort of every week, and this is something new for this year, right? Because
Okay.
to share with the audience, anyone who's a type A personality out there can relate to this. You know there's like so much that you need to do, right? But there's also like you can't do everything. So this year I really sort of taken the approach of like the one thing, right? Or prioritizing like what are the tasks at hand. So whether it's,
Hmm.
following up with the mentors, whether it's sort of, preparing for the next speaking engagement I have coming up, whether it's a group we have coming up with the players, and really sort of prioritizing what are the things for the month that we need to accomplish, what are the things for the week, and then sort of backing my way into what is it that I need to do for the day. And so I really try to commit to what I call 3 to 4 hours of deep work that I put in on
Hmm.
this every single day, because I've also learned, in entrepreneurship and in change making work, you've got to have balance, because we can get lost in this
Yeah.
and I could easily spend 10, 12, 18 hours doing this. But I really try to make sure that I sort of put in at least four, sometimes six. But what will happen then, sometimes I get these inspirations in the middle of the night. I grab my phone and I'm typing notes. So, it probably levels out to about 6 hours a day. But, typically I get up, I try to get up early, really get some quiet downtime, meditation time, then go work out just to get that sort of mental clarity, get my water, get my 30 ounces of water on the front end of the day, if you will, and then sit down with my laptop and sort of go through, whatever the task could be. So I block off that 4 to 5 hours that I'm just locked in on commit work. Then usually at the evening, I am going to kind of journal and I'll kind of go through like what did I do today? What did I feel like I accomplished? What's my sort of task for tomorrow? Is anything that I felt like I missed? And like, what am I most grateful for as it pertains to my day in this work? Yeah. And then drink the rest of my water. Drink the rest of my water
Nice.
and
Got to be
either,
hydrated.
yeah, stay hydrated and either read.
Got to be
I'll
hydrated.
do something, some type of reading, or listen to a podcast.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. Um, no, it's great. I'm always curious how people actually spend the hours of their day because it seems to be so different. We all getting stuff done, but we're all doing it differently.
Yes.
Um, okay, here's a moment that seems to be difficult for most of our Mira fellows, but let's do a little bit of bragging or of what has gotten done or what's happening, what's been happening in the past year that you're really proud of. Um, if you have any stories or anything um, about specific, you know, football players who've come through the program, or just give me a little flavor of
Bragging.
how cool things are going.
This is a hard part, but I challenged myself. Actually, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Good,
I actually
good,
challenged
good.
myself last week. I was like, Nita, you need to go update your resume. And meaning that, like, I was like, you are now speaking at all of these events, like you're engaging with all these parents, all these student athletes, right? You're developing like all these things are happening, and like they're up here, right? So we keep them up here
Right.
and they're here in our hearts, but it's like at the end of the day, it's part of the story. And so so I recently did that and sort of backed my way into it, and
Oh, good. Okay, good.
so I can share some of the things. So we have had our first cohort from last year that we successfully cohort of parents that we were able to mentor and take them through our commit mentoring and helping them navigate. So these were all parents of high school juniors and seniors whose
Hmm.
sons were preparing to transition into college. And so being able to spend time giving them, the tips and tools and resources, right, that were invaluable for them, as they put it, to help them know and understand what they don't know about the process. They don't know,
Hmm.
about applying. They don't know the recruiting process. When the coach comes and sits on your couch and says, "We want Johnny, right? And we're going to make sure we take care of Johnny." And mom and dad are like, is Coach Frank really telling us the truth, or
Right. Right.
what does that look like? So that's an example of a couple of families that we've had, that being able to really sit with them and help them understand and provide them with guidance on the appropriate questions they need to be asking. That's like one of the biggest things that we found, is that parents don't really ask the right questions. And so asking about
Mm.
majors, asking about mentors, asking about academic support, asking about internships, right? Asking
Hmm.
about sort of what are the opportunities that they have, to be able to focus on things out of football, asking about, injuries. What happens if my son gets hurt? Like, is he off the team? Does he lose his scholarship? Like, what's going to happen? So that's an example of things, areas that has been super helpful to our families. We've got, oh wow, we've got what, several, five or so players this past year who graduated high school and who are now
Mm-hmm.
successfully in college, who are playing and doing very well. And,
Nice.
just the report back that we've been getting about how helpful that this program has been for them and their moms, and being able to pair these athletes with mentors, right? So their mentors are going to be, former student athletes. So young men who
Mm-hmm.
did play in college, and got their degrees, graduated, and went on and took diverse career pathways. So some of them are college coaches. We do have some that have gone on to the NFL. Some of them are teachers, engineers, entrepreneurs. I mean, they're doing all types of things because we understand that like early exposure is so important. The earlier that these young men
Right.
can
Right.
see there's diverse pathways, that if I don't go to the NFL, like it's really okay. Because I got to play and I got my education, but for them to feel good about that. And so we spend a lot of time, with that. We had our first event, our own summit, we brought together, over 100 young men, and had panelists, we had speakers, we had presenters talking about financial literacy, talking about, again, how to select a major, talking about mental health, talking about how to recover from injuries, healthy relationships, and things like that. We had that this past summer, which was amazing. And of recent, so I've probably done five, four. I'm getting ready to do my fifth presentation next week, where I've spoken to probably collectively now over 500 parents that I've been
Hmm.
brought in to do parent seminars. And again, they're all high school parents whose sons are getting recruited to play college
Mm-hmm.
football. And so being able to stand in front of them and really walk them through to understand what this pathway involves, what does this trajectory involve, to help them to understand that you are your son's family, you are not his
Mm-hmm.
fan. That's one of the big points I
Right.
make to them, right? Because parents
Yeah. No, that's good.
parents get caught up in fandom. And so that's one of the
Right.
worst mistakes you can make, right? Because when you get caught up in fandom, that's when you begin to sort of skip over some of the important things. You overlook the failing grades, right? You overlook the bad
Right.
behavior at
Right.
times. And so, having speaking to those parents who are now then, after being able to go and present to them, who are like, well, give me more. Like we want more. We want to
Yeah.
find out more. So we're in the process now of developing and preparing for a soft launch of a couple of courses that we're going to be offering to parents that they can sign up for, and we'll walk them through some of the specific things. Like for example, NIL, name, image, likeness, is a huge, huge topic in college athletics right now. And so we're going to have a course available for parents to really dig down into the weeds of NIL and helping them to understand, before you don't make a decision because they're offering your kid,
Right.
$500,000, right? For them to be able to hear that. And so that's just some of the things that are going.
That's great.
Oh,
No,
and
thank you. That's
speaking to NFL teams, that had my recently, that was November, had a chance to speak to a group of rookie parents whose sons are
mm,
their first year in the NFL, and being able to talk with them about what that experience is like. Um, I was able to share for my own journey. I'm in my just I'm going into my third year as an NFL mom,
well,
and so being able to also talk to rookie, NFL parents about how to prepare their sons for life after football, because NFL stands for not for long.
right.
Yeah.
True. True. Uh, so what's next? I mean, where do you sort of see what's the sort of the next big step for commit? Maybe in the next year or 2 years, or where do you want to be?
Where do I want to be? Okay, so I think there's a couple of fronts where I'd like to see myself. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really seeing and understanding the need, the lack of information, the lack of knowledge that so many families have, and they're not getting it in the high schools, right? Because again,
Mm-hmm.
high school coaches, same thing. They're trying to win. those academic advisors, they're not necessarily equipped to help prepare kids to be student athletes. And so being able to really develop curriculum and getting access and being able to actually now get into schools, right, where I can go and talk and do presentations in high schools
Hmm.
and at the collegiate level. Them being able to bring me in to be able to talk to them about commit, to be able to talk to them about, how do you prepare now for life after football. So that's on that front. In terms of our mentoring, we'll develop. Gosh, we'll probably have at least definitely probably doubling, if not tripling, the size of our cohorts that we're working with because we've got more
Hmm.
systems in place that we can manage more families and being
Hmm.
able to pair them now, right? So pairing a first year mom, her son maybe is, a junior with a mom whose son is a sophomore in college, right? So that mom being able to sort of help that other mom navigate that
Yeah.
next step. And then expanding our mentoring for sure, whether it's we're doing mentoring circles and really testing out, I think, just like what are other ways we can expand that and make it more scalable. Um, and so we're looking at some models now of what that would look like to be able to do that. And then last, I would say also expanding more with the NFL because I just feel like at that level they've got a lot of money, right? And this is
Right.
this is
Right.
something that should be important to them, right? Because they're constantly just
Right.
just turning this stuff over, right? And so being able to develop, some more partnerships maybe in that space and look at some sponsorship opportunities to get behind this work, as well as with the NCAA, right? At the collegiate level, that's the governing
Right.
body, the NCAA. But I feel like, the NFL, we know they got a lot of money. So being able
They certainly do.
right, being able to look into that and get in with more teams. And ultimately, I mean, listen, I believe that, every student who wants to, pursue a pro dream needs to catch an education in the process. And so
Hmm.
that for me, every day to be able to get up and say, okay, what is the work that I need to do today? I need to do that over the next month. I need to do over the next year that gets us closer to that. And so we know that, we'll be able to continue to work towards that and grow and expand. And I fully expect Commit, in the years to come to be a national organization in what we're doing and that we're, reaching into the places that have the largest numbers of student athletes
Hmm.
in football. And that's going to be Texas, Florida, and California, but that we'll have an expansive network all over the country.
It's so cool to hear. I don't know, I guess I haven't talked to you for a while, but it's so cool to hear. Like, I don't know. I feel like, oh, cool. This is going out into the world. It's so
It's going out to the
exciting.
world. I think there's a point in this. It's just if things start to happen, Kai. Like I think
Right.
I think just for listeners to hear that sometimes we look at people like we'll look at someone and be like, oh, like you're here, you've done all this great stuff, but we really don't sort of peek behind the curtain to see understand
Right.
process. And
Right.
one of the most valuable things that I learned in the fellowship was this idea of experimenting, right? Experimentation, right? Being able to iterate the
Hmm.
ideas. And that was something I was super resistant to year one. Because again, for my type A folks who are listening, you want it to be perfect. You want to have it all figured
Right.
out. Like you just it's supposed to just be. But really it's just this it's this idea. Like, okay, I've got this globe that I have sitting. I have a lot of things. So I have this globe sitting here, right? This is
Uh
like
huh.
it says, follow that dream, right?
Uh
And
huh.
so following the dream sometimes means like, man, this shit is hard, or it just means like, I tried
Right.
this and it failed, but that's a good thing, right? So like completely embracing the like, oh, this didn't work. That's great. Now I know that that's not the route I need to go. Or this worked right
Right.
here. And it's like, okay, how can I build on that? The second thing is like the scalability piece of it, right? Because if the work is completely dependent on Nita showing up, something we can't like that can't
Right.
be.
Right.
And so simplification, being able to simplify, right? And when you ask me where do I see myself and where do I see the work, I kind of see these three buckets, but simplifying it within each, right, of what that means and
Right.
what that
Okay.
looks like. And so you just continue. You wake up every day and you're just like, I get to do this. Not I have to do this, but I
Right.
get to do this, right? And when you get to do it, and you see the results. And I'm looking at these parents, and I'm finishing these presentations, and they're just like, oh my God, thank you so much. Or I didn't know what I didn't know. Or now I feel like I'm so much better equipped to navigate this. That's what I'm talking about. Or our young men are just like, thank you for this mentoring session, or thank you for pairing me with this person who, this former student athlete who answered all of my questions. And now I feel like there is someone out there who's got my back, and I can relate to and understands my journey. That's what we all want, really. I mean, think about
Right.
it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, we don't want to have to navigate life on our own. We don't want to have to navigate by ourselves. And that's really what this is about. It's about making sure that these young men and their families who are on a very unique journey, right? Small percentage ever get to do this. Less than 2% get to play at the pro level.
Right.
That they've got a community of care, community of support, and they're able to navigate this journey with confidence and care.
That's wonderful. I love how you said that. Okay, two more things, and then I'll let you go. In the spirit of Mira, um, what do you need help with right now? If you could ask
Okay.
the community, Mira Fellowship, someone else who we may get to, what do you need help with?
Hmm. I feel like I need help with what I had just said about testing different methodologies for what's going to be really going to be the best approach for the mentoring to get it scalable where I'd love to see it be. Because I think there's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like this quantitative piece of it where I wanted to be like, we hold them close, and that's great. But sometimes it's hard to hold people close when there's like 5,000 people you're trying to hold, right?
It
I
does get more
think
difficult as there
that
get to be
gets
more
it
people.
gets exactly right. So I've been thinking about, and I was actually reading about this idea of like the micro communities, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
creating micro communities within the mentoring, or I've been reading about this idea of like flash mentoring, and like what would
Mm-hmm.
that look like, and just exploring like different types of software. Because the idea you had shared with me from the beginning was like, put them in a group, like test out the WhatsApp. And like that actually worked really well. Like, how do we then now step back and like put it in place and being able to scale it? And so that's definitely something I would say probably is my sticking point right now that I'm
Okay.
really like thinking through and trying to figure out that, and drilling down a little bit more on story, I would say. But I know you got me on that. So
We'll work on that. We'll
yeah,
work on
we'll
that.
work
That'd be
on it.
fun.
I've gotten better though. I've gotten better.
No, you definitely have. Oh no,
Mhm.
I've been thinking that the
I
whole
know
time
you're
we're sitting
listening,
here.
like exactly. And I did no prep before this. I was going to. I was like, Nita, you don't need to be compulsive about this. I need you just to
No,
sit down. I need you just to talk. We
is
just having a
yeah.
conversation. So, but no, I do. I feel a lot more comfortable, and I do have a lot more confidence about telling the story and the work. But that's because I'm doing it right. I'm doing the
Right,
work, and I'm having to talk about it more. And
right,
I'm having to
right.
stand in front of people, and I'm having to introduce the ideas, and as people are coming and like, tell me what about this work, because what's happening is people, their interests are being piqued, and I do think there are folks who are like, hey, we want to get involved in this, or we'd like to give to this,
Right.
or we'd
Right.
like to help advance this. So
Last thing, we're sort of jokingly trying to encourage people or to come up with techniques for how people can get in their own way or how they could actually get out of their way.
mm,
Do you have any secrets to getting in your own way and preventing this incredible work from happening?
hmm, hmm. Well, I mean, I think a lot of times we feel like tomorrow, tomorrow,
Right.
tomorrow, I can do it tomorrow, tomorrow. And that's what we all think. We all think that there's a tomorrow. When you are willing to understand that there's an urgency for
Hmm.
the work, there's an urgency that is married to your idea. There's an urgency that's
Hmm.
connected to what it is you're going to do. And the tomorrowness and the delay and the procrastination really then is in conflict with the sense of urgency. And I've come to realize that there are thousands of people, who are waiting for Nita to do what she's doing. I can think of about 1,000 folks right now who are waiting for me to launch that course. But if I'm constantly saying tomorrow, I'll get to it tomorrow, I'll get to it next week, I'll get to it, and we're constantly putting it off, it's such a disservice, right? Because it's not just about letting me down, but like all the world needs what I'm doing, right? And that's why the idea was given to me. So my willingness
Right.
to say yes, right, and to do it, and also I would say is like I'm also understanding that because we feel like we've got to like break the whole boulder down overnight. That's not true. You don't have to hammer it and it's
Right.
all going to fall into the right place. No, every small step is still forward movement. So
Right.
sometimes the win is just in the small step. And so, again, to my type A folks, because I know that's something that I would constantly deal with, that if I'm not making these sweeping, huge successive wins, then I'm not doing anything. And that's just not true. But it really sometimes is in the win is in I woke up today and decided like I'm going to spend an hour on this work or I'm before I go to bed tonight,
Right.
I'm going to do some reading on this topic. And so I have found different ways to infuse because life happens and life is gonna life is always gonna happen. So when people are like, but I can't because I'd love to have a conversation with you about I can because, right?
Right.
I
Nice.
can
Yeah.
because for 30 minutes for this next week, I'm going to read something on this topic. I can because I'm going to listen to this podcast, right? About folks
Right.
who are
Right.
doing this work, pursuing their big ideas and all that. I can because I'm going to carve out an hour a month to interview someone or whatever it is. But like I don't know, I just feel like we use time as an escape, as a reason why we
Mm-hmm.
can't. And
Right.
all of us have different situations and circumstances, and I completely understand that. But I do stand on like we find time for the things that we want to do. And
Right.
I might have 5 hours a day, and someone might have 50 minutes a day, and that's okay, right? But
Right.
you take your 50 minutes. Don't use that as an excuse, right? To not do it.
Right. No,
And
I love it.
yeah,
I love the way I just, yeah, the way you're saying your idea comes with an urgency attached to it. That there's just something really true about that.
yes, it is. And if you have to understand that, right? And it's just
Right.
like, you know, just like I've got this jar, right? Ideas and things. And then if I just sit it there, right? And I'm just like, I'm looking at it every day and like nothing's happening. Like it's just sitting there, right? There's an
Right.
urgency, right?
Right. 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 That's wonderful. I feel like that's a good thing to close on here. Thank you so much for being our guinea pig here on our first little podcast.
Thank you.
Fun to get a little sense of what's happening in your world.